Hello and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann. You can call me H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal. You can call me QH. It's time to change formats.
Oh no, I'm not prepared for this.
I'm catching you off guard. You see, I'm fresh off of seeing literally moments ago, just finished the first episode of the latest season of Doctor Who.
Okay.
Have you heard about any of this Doctor Whovian news developments over the past week or so?
Over the past week, let's see, I was clued in pretty closely probably 6 months ago.
Okay.
But nothing in the last week. What happened?
It hasn't changed really in 6 months, but suffice to say, the new Doctor is a female.
Oh, it's like that riddle. I can't operate on him. He's my son. Why? Because Doctor Who is a woman.
The woman the whole time. We were just biased. We were bringing the patriarchy into the joke. Right. It's so good. H, you have to. You're not a Whovian in any way. Is that correct?
I've seen the first couple of seasons after they did the reboot.
Oh, okay. Wow,
but
that's
I don't
a lot.
Keep up with it necessarily. So,
I hate to use this platform to do this, but there's never been a better time to get into Doctor Who. I really loved it. The cinematography is now, I would say, if you've seen those first couple seasons, you know it goes from like very British, like off kilter, not really super put together, to there's a moment when they transition to a new Doctor about halfway through that reboot where it takes on a very sort of Fox crime drama look, where it starts to get a little more colorful and a little bit more dramatic with its lighting, and color grading gets involved. But this latest season is now at the like HBO Netflix tier of production. There are certain scenes and shots that are just absolutely cinematographic, if that's even a term. It's really well shot.
And just like HBO Netflix, it's about 70% stand-up specials, which is weird for a Doctor Who season, but it really pulls together.
Yes, they recently retired the boxing aspect of the new Doctor Who and the adult film stuff, so that's exciting.
That's a shame.
But yeah, it's really good. I think you could probably skip the in-between stuff, but hopefully they pay some fan service to the in-between stuff with this new Doctor. But it's really, really well done. So, hot tip, go check it out.
All right, so that's your takeaway from the new Doctor Who, is it needs more fan service. There we go.
Yeah, quote me on
I
that.
can always count on you for the appropriate takes.
Yep.
Well, let's get to some video games. How about?
Okay.
Today I'm going to go first, and we might have even pitched this game before. It's one of those where I'm not entirely sure, but here we go.
Yeah, every new idea I feel like I come up with these days, I'm like, surely this has made an appearst on the show.
We must have done this by now.
Right. There's no way
70
I have a
episodes
new idea.
in. So this is an FPS first-person shooter with a gun that corrupts game information, and if you miss your opponent, it leaves a hole in the map, like a spot that you can fall through. And so as you shoot more, as you have more of a firefight, the world becomes this kind of Swiss cheese type of scenario, and you have to be very careful navigating around. And so maybe you can use that to your advantage, like Wile E. Coyote style, like leaving them surrounded by holes that they can't cross. But yeah, essentially you're just blowing holes and things. So we'll start there then.
Cool. So I immediately started thinking about that sort of Axiom Verge glitch gun that came to mind. Have you seen this? You know what I'm talking about?
I know the game. I haven't played it though, so I don't know the specifics.
So essentially you get a gun in that game that has the ability to kind of, while it's not the most efficient attack weapon, it can kind of glitch out certain aspects of a level and turn potentially enemies into platforms, or platforms into malleable walls that you can pass through. There's all sorts of little cool properties it has. But I started thinking, if you had this thing that like punched holes in the environment, wouldn't it be interesting if in some way you could like punch holes in bad guys? Like what could you like potentially expose? You know how some horror movies, they like cut off something's arm and then it just grows this like bigger, longer, like grosser arm. I wonder if you could like empower potentially your enemies that you have to slay with this same weapon.
That would be interesting if every body part had like maybe 5 transformations and then they had like a vulnerable one on the inside, like a Russian nesting doll. But, you know, it gets more powerful until you uncover the vulnerable one. So as you're having these fights, you're actually making your enemy more dangerous before you can really take it out.
Yeah, I like the idea of being able to punch holes in the environment, but then like what happens when you fall through? Like what's the consequence of death?
Well, I mean, death, right?
Well, yeah, I guess what I mean to say is, can I like put myself, like, can I really break the game? Does it really break the game code? Like, can I make a level unwinnable?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm kind of picturing this as like a multiplayer type thing. And so it would be like a versus type scenario. And so if like it would be like falling through the bottom of a stage and you can see like the untextured bits from down below.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah. Which is a strange thing to admit, but
yeah, right. And so I was thinking originally like it'd be kind of fun if this gun corrupts game elements. So maybe the first time it kind of removes the texturing and then it simplifies the wireframe and then you can actually see through it with like just the wireframe edges, and then you can fall through that. And it would have that effect on everything that it touches, you know, including the other players. But, you know, I'm definitely able to take this in whatever direction. If we want to get like big in the Red Faction Guerrilla about the way that we blow holes and things, and I'm totally cool with that.
I think it would be neat to have, you know, so many. I'm gonna pitch this, and people are gonna go, "That does not sound neat," right? I think in my head, which is so many of first-person shooters are so Twitch based, and especially in the competitive scene, like it's who can put the tiny little white dot on who the fastest and most accurately, right? One of the things I love about a game like Overwatch is you have characters like Winston or Mercy, who their primary weapon has a little bit of honing to it, but in Winston's case, it's a little messy. You're not quite hitting the thing maybe you expect you're hitting. And if this gun had a property like that, like it was a gun so powerful, it's blowing holes through the environment, I love the idea of like this hunt going around, or you could potentially die from 1 or 2 shots of this thing. But if it, say, hits a wall before it goes through you, it's entirely ineffective. You're just kind of giving away your position and clearing the path for your opponent.
Let's think also about like what are ways that we can use if we have a terrain destroying gun. What are ways that we can use that to our advantage? I like Rainbow Six Siege, where part of the game is destroying the environment around you and making line of sight where previously there would have been walls in the way and, you know, stuff like that. And so, you know, what creative ways can we use a terrain destroying equipment to enhance the gameplay experience?
For me, I think it would be really cool to have something where you have giant momentum like pads or something, some energy fields, the sort of things you get that propel you upwards in games, but maybe they can also propel you left or right. And so you find yourself knocking down walls so that you can actually be propelled near across the map in an instant. So you're kind of creating these fast lanes of travel all over the place.
I wonder if you do have a gun that corrupts game data, if these like power-up type of materials could have you could set them as traps almost.
Oh, okay.
You know, if you were to corrupt the function of something, maybe if it's a bounce pad, then a corrupted version would launch you and never let you down. So you'll just keep on floating out into the air or whatever.
Yeah, or could you imagine potentially getting these sort of Fortnite-esque spike traps or something, setting those on a floor, and when somebody goes to shoot out the floor beneath them, they find themselves falling onto spikes. So you could kind of set those things up everywhere that somebody would potentially be gaining some level of momentum.
It feels like kind of a straightforward implementation of a trap. Let's get really creative. This feels like a different idea. Well, you know what? Let's go for it. Let's say, nah, that is a different idea. That's not going to work here. Yeah, I'm going to write that down for next week.
Okay, save it. You can also do things, I think, in addition to your sort of traditional, oh, I made the walls spikes or whatever, like there's an energy field or something. I love the idea of maybe having, instead of grenades, like bombs that could burrow into walls. So if somebody goes to shoot it, potentially it blows back on them, or it damages more than intended, or depending on the wall you're blowing up, maybe you shoot through it and you hit like a power cell and you end up causing a chain reaction and blowing up way more of the map than you intend. Like, I love the idea of putting things behind some of the walls that would cause reactions that potentially make, there's like no risk in shooting a wall, right? Like, how do you create that risk is where my mind is circling around.
It'd be interesting if you had control of like the black holes in Super Mario Galaxy, where, you know, as soon as you enter kind of their sphere, they pull you in. And so you can hide these in places, and maybe their effect is blocked off by walls or something. So as soon as somebody shoots out a wall, then it's like getting sucked out of an airlock in an Aliens movie or something.
Oh, that's cool. I'm thinking, you know, I mean, the long-standing game that everybody points to, or series that everybody points to for destruction, is Red Faction, right? And their most recent entry had you running around with a hammer or something, didn't they? Where you were kind of smashing up walls that way?
Well, yes and no. A Red Faction Guerrilla, which was on the Xbox 360, had some pretty impressive destruction physics. They made one since then that wasn't very good, also on the Xbox 360, and then they remastered the good one. So in a way, it is the most recent, but it's also kind of not.
Yeah, okay. So I had Guerrilla on my mind. I forget about the one that came after Guerrilla.
It was a Red Faction Armageddon or something like that. It was a super forgettable title. You know, one of the real generic ones. It doesn't sound
like I missed much.
No, I don't think so.
I'm trying to think about, like, what if the level was less like your traditional Rainbow Six map, and instead it was like a geometric solid, and you had to kind of Minecraft carve your way around it.
That's a good idea. Okay, so it's like a 3D Worms game then.
Yeah, almost. I've never played a Worms game, so I don't know.
Oh, really? Oh, you really should. I mean...
Oh, no. A new thing.
Yeah, no, they're good. One of the things about Worms, it's a side-on perspective. It's like those little tank games that were pretty popular. But you have all these silly weapons, and they not only damage the opponent worm units, they also, their splash damage destroys bits of the stage. And so it kind of eats away at it, and it changes the terrain. And so you could definitely do something like that in 3D as well, where you have to navigate this space. In Worms, you even had weapons like the blowtorch or the mole grenades that their purpose is to allow you to navigate through the course, to burn your own way through the course to get to somewhere else, whether it's an item or an enemy that you want to hit, or if you want to set a trap for them. Yeah, you should play Worms. You would like it.
Yeah, so, man, that makes sense to me. And if you took that feeling of, so many times when I like attempt to play Minecraft, and I can't play that game very well, as much as a game as there is there, but when I go to play it, that sensation of being underground, having nothing except for a shovel or pickaxe, and digging, and then that moment where you like crack open a wall and you're inside a cavern, and it's really big, and it's revealing, and it's magnificent, and that feeling of, whoa, the stuff inside here is really cool. And then if you were to smash that up against the feeling of a overbuilt fort in Fortnite, where players are chopping down walls with, maybe there's going to be another person on the other side of this, I have no idea, and they're totally ready to shoot me because it took a couple hits to kind of knock this wall down. I think having a game where there's that constant expectation of potentially I'm knocking down a wall to give an opponent a point blank shot to my face is kind of compelling.
That's cool. I like where this is going. We have to stop it there, though, and let's give it a name. I feel like this would suit a Minecraft pun well.
It's a first-person shooter. You could call it something like Tunnel Vision.
That's fine. Oh, that'll do.
I feel like that's one of those pitches where I feel like we just started to warm up and we settled on the name. This is the time for all of our listeners out there to please write in call. You don't have either of our phone numbers, but if you can find a way to call, actually, please don't. Just write in and help us with where we should continue to take this and what we should name the darn thing.
Well, let's see what you've got up your sleeve today. It's your turn to pitch.
My pitch today is simple, straightforward, I hope. I love the game Beguiled. And I love puzzle games against other people. I learned this about myself in multiplayer Tetris. So, I thought, what if there was a multiplayer, say 2 to 6 or 4 to 8 something player, large Beguiled grid where all the players are playing for matches at the same time. If your match cascades into somebody else's match, maybe both of you get points, maybe you can subtract points from them, and you get to combine jewels in different ways to create bombs and traps for other people to accidentally trigger as part of their matches, and potentially lose them points or gain you points, whatever. We can figure it all out in the details.
Interesting. Well, let's start the clock then. So when you say making somebody else's match, is that does that mean that everybody owns a color, or like how do you determine what is your match and what is somebody else's?
Yeah, so this is the thing that is interesting to me. So often, head-to-head puzzle games are always both people have their own puzzles that they're trying to separately solve. I love the idea of creating that big grid that people are all competing for matches at the same time. So the speed of which you're able to identify a match somewhere on the board is happening in real time against all the players. Maybe this is only controllable with 2 people. But if the grid is large enough, I think you could do multiple. If somebody finds a match before you, they play it. The points that are banked go to them. If you both play a match within, let's say, some grace period of each other, very, very soon after, potentially you both get points, so on and so forth.
I feel like it would be interesting if the grid started out kind of unreasonably big at first, and so there's always going to be matches, and people just kind of start looking wherever, and there's very little crossover. There's very little like people competing for the same matches. And at that point, you can choose to either sabotage what your opponents are doing, or just to find your own little corner of the board and start matching there. And then as the match goes on, the grid gets smaller and smaller until eventually like you're competing for every last match that you can grab.
Yeah, that's cool. So you get the battle royale. Well, now we've got Beguiled battle royale happening, which is kind of cool. Maybe as you play, you could also shrink the number of players. Maybe it starts off as like a 10-player thing. You have point thresholds, and if you haven't met the point threshold by the time is up, then you're eliminated. And so you have this kind of like frantic play for points. Everyone's hunting for the big matches.
Yeah, or it's just the kind of standard racing game thing where after a little while the person in the last place is eliminated. Yeah, I like that. That does give a certain rhythm to the shrinking board as well. So one of the things that I'm curious about is that there's not a ton of strategy involved in color matching games. Maybe I'm wrong, but from what I've surmised from my time with Beguiled, which is, a long time by now, I feel like the game ends when it wants to end, and there's not a lot that I can do other than like keeping a couple for a rainy day in the corner that I know I can always count on, but like there's not a lot that I can do to really set myself up for success or failure. Yeah,
that's a great point. And I get the same feeling of Beguiled, especially when I'm playing in classic mode, that when you get that kind of classic, no more moves, right? Yeah. Like that always feels like in a lot of playthroughs that you didn't have full control over that scenario. I'm sure maybe
especially because there is like the endless mode, and so that like whatever state the board finds itself in, if it wants to make a match, it can. So it is just deciding the game is over.
Right, exactly. You're like, you could match this if you really wanted to, Beguiled. You chose to drop the shitty pieces. Yeah, so you'd either have to compensate for that or, okay, so maybe if you're trying to race to get higher scores, you can spend score to maybe swap a color or to, inject some level of less randomness and a little bit more skill into the board. Maybe every player is assigned one of the Beguiled colors and you can kind of boom, splash in your color in a section.
Okay.
And so that would at least eliminate the possibility of you being totally matchless. But yeah, you would have to imagine this thing has to use the algorithm of always have matches on the board, right? Because I love the idea of 2 or 3 people all scrambling to pick the 3 green triangles at the top over and over as nothing else is on the board.
So another thing about color matching games like Beguiled that I don't know if it suits the kind of frantic real-time multiplayer competitive matches is that a lot of the ways to actually succeed and to get high scores in these games is to set yourself up for like long-term payoffs, to set aside a 4 in a row because you think you can turn it into a 5 in a row, and that's like, that's really good. So you set that aside and try to match tiles in the next column over to try to get that last piece that you need to connect them all. And that's the kind of thing that if I saw somebody else working on something like that on the other side of the board, I would just go over there and ruin it for them, just take a few points for myself. So how do we keep it from being like too easy to sabotage other players to where it just would not be any fun?
Right. Are you saying that right now you're not incentivized at all to kind of have that build up of score?
Even if you can do it, like in chess, there's a lot of defensive options. And so if you want to set up something tricky, then you can, because you can kind of surround those pieces with the other pieces and kind of set up a perimeter. But in Beguiled, where everything is just kind of on the board, if you're trying to set up something for long-term success, like there's no incentive for other people to not ruin it for you.
Right, because whoever takes the match kind of gets it. Maybe, okay, here we go. Hear me out. The concept in Beguiled of kind of hitting 4 things in a row to create one like super gem.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe creating a super gem claims it for a player.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when you have the initial stage of people combining to get these 4-up super gems, there's like a land claiming thing happening. And then matches that involve that gem in the future, you get some amount of credit for it if somebody else matched it, or you get like extra credit for it if you manage to capitalize on the match.
So another direction we can take this is there's a few like battle matching games like Marvel Puzzle Quest and Puzzle and Dragon, where the matching is actually like kind of literalized into some other type of gameplay mechanic and something that's more aggressive. And so something like that could also work, but also, I think this is a challenging idea, so I don't want to just like make it easier for ourselves if we're pursuing new territory. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Yeah, so what are some of the mechanics that you get in those? I feel like in some of those you're dealing with players that have health bars. So maybe do we need the concept of energy or health, like aside from the points?
Right, just kind of a standard RPG type setup where you're either fighting monsters, you're fighting enemy mobs or bosses or whatever, and you, and generally in a Marvel Puzzle Quest anyways, the different colors of gems represent different power sets, and so you can have heroes that are, proficient in lightning or something, and then you can match lightning gems and activate those attacks.
Okay, so maybe in addition to like that splash of color, then you could take on also something where matches of that color give you like your special ability, give you charges to use your special ability, whether or not you potentially made the match. I think that is kind of interesting that you could, if you just feverishly start matching, you could start feeding an opponent like that's opposite of you. You could start feeding their abilities. And now all of a sudden you're kind of in this like standoff of like, okay, well, I've got more matches than you, but you can kind of just ruin my day.
Yeah, there we go.
And take a bunch of credit for matches that I maybe have set up.
So you're getting points and you need points, but at the same time, you're kind of feeding your enemy what they need to do better in the long run.
Yeah, it could be one of those things where at this point there's too many things to kind of keep in your head at a time, but at least that would be a level of complexity that would make you think twice before you just blindly match the first set of 3 things you find.
That's a good point. Let's end it there. What are we going to call this one?
You know, they already took Beguiled Blitz, so I guess I can't use that. I mean, why not? Why don't we do like Beguiled Battle or Beguiled Battle Royale even? Like, what do you think?
Jeez. Yeah, I mean, if it was a 3-player game, you can call it 3-jeweled, but that's a weird number of players.
If it's not Beguiled, I feel like Beguiled Battle has to be already named. Beguiled.
That's pretty good.
There it is, Beguiled.
All right, Beguiled. I like that. People won't understand until they listen to the episode.
That's right.
Now we're going to our community. We hear from Spencer Saunders, who we haven't heard from for a very long time now. Spencer writes in, the short and needlessly snarky version of this pitch is Persona, but replace the bad parts with good parts. Though I suppose you could probably prefer the long version. From what I've seen and played of Persona, they often have a core theme of creating and growing friendships, a theme which is mechanized through the social link system. I would like to propose an inversion of the theme. You play as a character who has moved into a point of their life where they have to leave many of their friends elsewhere, or perhaps their friends are leaving them. As tends to happen, some friendships may be maintained over time and distance, but many others would quickly pass into memory. This takes the already fun part of Persona, the social sim, and tasks you with deciding who to dedicate time to, while also juggling your other responsibilities. The second part of the game, where we replace the bad part of Persona, comes during the nights and weekends, in which you must fight off some physical embodiment of the struggles of loneliness and stagnation. This portion of the game, I think, would be interesting as an arcade fighter, but I'm open to other ideas. How you have dealt with other characters in the game will determine what difficulty your opponents will be, and will influence your fighting style. Alright, starting the clock.
Wow. Well, I will tell you this. I was riveted and you had me when you said replace the bad parts of Persona with good parts. And then you lost me when we disagreed about what the bad parts of Persona were. I'm excited to talk about this because I hate all the social link stuff in Persona, so I'm interested in ways
I like that stuff. That's
good. Everybody likes that. So that's the one thing about that game that I'm just like, I don't want to talk to anybody. But it sounds like this might suit me because maybe being antisocial is the name of the game here.
So this is an interesting setup here, is that you are physically removed from all these people and you can choose to either email or call them or whatever. Maybe you're on like a space mission or something.
Oh, yes.
I guess whatever you're fighting against are all like, I don't know, the type of hallucinations that like people in movies that are stranded on islands get or something like that, you know?
Yeah, that's really cool. And the setting of space is a great reason to say like, oh, hey, the number of transmissions you can make in a time period are limited, right? So what I think is cool about the premise is the idea of having a calendar. You know, you have this kind of calendar in Persona that's like, hey, here's all the things that you could do and things that, but you're kind of, you know, there's FOMO, right? You're going to kind of miss out on some of them. Mm-hmm. The FOMO, though, is always potential FOMO. The idea of like, oh, well, you just missed Joe's birthday. You know, you just missed Mary's wedding anniversary. Or like you had all these friends and you just slowly... This is a very typical thing in adulthood, too. If you make a lot of friends when you're younger and then you kind of... You know, people have babies, they get married, they move away. The idea of saying, you know, this person is not a big enough thing anymore. Maybe the idea is to hold on to as many relationships by the end of the game as you can.
Maybe there's some sort of an inverse relationship between holding on to relationships and actually accomplishing your job. Not that I want to encourage people to just like go off and be loners in the world, but
You can either do your job or have friends.
do as I say and not as I do. What if it's like the movie Interstellar, where you kind of play with the passage of time, and that as you do more of your work, maybe you're experimenting with time manipulation technology or something that will eventually save the world. But every time that you get really deep into it, and every time that you go into the actual gameplay portion of the game, time passes quicker. And so as you dungeon crawl or do whatever you do in Persona, I've played Persona, but whatever you do in this version of the game, more and more time passes, and then you miss more and more of your friends' lives. And, you want to get back before everyone dies, but, if you're up there, it just takes as long as it takes to accomplish your mission.
Right, and if you missed connections and the levels have become more difficult and they take more time to accomplish, I almost feel like that's double punishing you, but maybe that is effective in that scenario.
Let's say as you talk to people, you gain skills that you can use in the gameplay portion of the game. And so it makes that portion easier. You're given some incentive to do that. But let's see, what is the downside then? Maybe I'm just heaping all the incentives onto one side there.
So, okay, let's go through some of the individual things that happen in this game. I think it would be interesting if you had something of a social media feed that you potentially scrolled through and you checked. And I like the idea of, if you choose to opt out of a conversation, maybe it's somebody's, a special event for them. Maybe it's just a totally mundane day, but because of that, they never tell you about this important thing that's about to happen in their life. So like by the time they get married or they have that child or whatever it is in their life event occurs, since you never talked to them about it, you chose not to speak to them for whatever reason, maybe you're developing somebody else. By the time that thing rolls around, they're really not in any mood to talk to you anyway. They're like, oh, you didn't seem to care before, right? That kind of painful reminder of sometimes the choices that we make. That could be really interesting to, like, you don't find out somebody was going to have a child. You don't find out about somebody's diagnosis even, and the next time you talk to them, they don't even bring it up because, oh, I thought everybody knew at this point.
I mean, you want to give the player the idea that they're missing things. And so if you were never to bring it up, then they wouldn't have any way, unless you hear it from other people or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I like this idea of like people hold some sort of a resentment. Although, I mean, it's not like you're up there just, having a vacation.
Yeah, that's true. When the space setting makes you very sympathetic as a character, doesn't it? Maybe it's just Iowa instead of space.
Maybe you need to continue doing this research to power your own spaceship. And so it's the balance between doing the work, which kind of chips away at this gauge that you need to fill throughout the entire game or whatever. You need to solve this problem by the end of the game. And that kind of like heals you. It makes life easier. It makes you, it gives the ship more energy to produce food, or it allows you to sleep better. It basically like refills your HP, I guess. It makes everything function more optimally. You have energy, which could be diverted either into making phone calls back to Earth or to growing food. And so you have to choose there. But if you go and do these missions, then you start to have a surplus and you can afford to make more calls, The
thing you're incentivized to do is to self-maintain, right? And to think about and sort of work on yourself, work on your environment, work on the either the physical or the mental well-being of your character. The inverse is the social, you kind of are talking to people because you have to in order to make the dungeon easier. I'm a little tripped up.
You could even pull in like Darkest Dungeon type of elements where if you don't talk to people for too long, then you start to go crazy or something. And there's all these kind of like inverse mental effects. And so you have to balance the actual physical survival of maintaining your ship and performing these missions to give your ship energy versus the mental necessity of keeping up with your friends and your family and everything, but, they are rapidly aging every time you go into the dungeons, and so you can either choose to kind of hold on to a moment right here and now, or you can go into the dungeon to, do your best to survive another night.
Yeah, I think like most sci-fi, the movie Moon comes to mind here, right? Where there's almost no version of this that doesn't feel like it ends bleakly.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's room for that, like in a Papers, Please type scenario.
Yeah, I guess so. I think it's interesting when Spencer talks about in this pitch, the idea of you're literally fighting off the bad dreams. Maybe after you have conversations with certain people, it creates a certain type of dream, right? Maybe you have certain thoughts and feelings about all the different people you talk to. Maybe you're in good standing in the relationship or bad standing in the relationship, but depending on what both you think of that person and how the interaction with them went, you kind of leave yourself with some baseline level of either happiness or anxiety. So that, if you have a really difficult conversation with somebody that you love, you might be in for a rough night. Whereas if you have a really potentially pleasant conversation with someone who you haven't talked to in a long time, an old friend, you could be in for a potentially more forgiving battle, I guess, that evening, as silly as that feels like to say when we're talking about these kind of sensitive social things.
Let's wrap that one and let's find a name for it.
I'm going to take a pull here from my favorite television show, Star Trek The Next Generation. Lonely Among Us.
That's a good one. I mean, he isn't actually among us, but
that's
you
true.
get the idea, and he is actually lonely. So, yeah, I think that fits just fine. All right, well, that was a pitch from Spencer Saunders from our community. If you would like to write us in, that is playwrightcast@gmail.com. You can go to our website, playwrightcast.com/pitch, or you can tweet us at playwrightcast.
Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World, from the album Blue Noise. It's very good, and you can listen to it while you're checking out our show that is now available on Spotify. That's right. If you're a spot ahead, I think that's what those people are called. If you're a spotty boy or a spotty girl, Playwright is now available on Spotify. So go open up Spotify right now, give it a search, PLAYWRITE, and hopefully you'll find us there, and we'll get all sorts of warm feelings. I don't know if you can even review us on Spotify, but if you can, do it. If not, go ahead over to Apple Music and Apple Podcasts and leave us a review there. That helps us get found.
That's right. Now you can just you can request, Siri, play my favorite podcast.
Is that true?
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, you know what? You could set it up. Yeah, that's
Spotify,
right.
I feel like there has to be some sort of an interaction.
In iOS 12, you can set up a Siri shortcut, and you can say, Siri, play my favorite podcast. And you could say, hey Siri, what are H and Q up to? And then, oh my God, that just triggered my Siri. Speaking of which, I do want to make this programming note. I know a lot of people have written in, and you have to wait usually a very long time to hear your pitch if we're getting through a bunch, but we are coming to the bottom of the barrel here. So if you write in your idea, you will probably hear it as soon as next week. But we will manage that accordingly, but we're ready for your pitches. So write in, and it doesn't have to be a big idea. It can be just, hey, what if Tetris plus Fortnite? But not that idea, because that was bad.
I bet there's something there.
We can try it. We can make it work.
Let's go out with a miniature idea today. What I want to do is, inspired by that Harry Potter MMO that is apparently in development.
Whoa.
Whoops. Yeah. Did you see that? The video leak?
I did.
Yeah. I want to do a Harry Potter type game crossed with the Euro Truck Simulator type games where you play as owls delivering packages.
Oh, perfect.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week.
Bye.